still have your citizens initiative, right? So it really, what you said a few minutes ago was you didn't have a lot of faith in the political process, but this is a process that we're going through, and it seems like we're already at the final decision. We've already made that, so it really doesn't make any difference what we do.
I disagree with you on that point.
Well, would you clarify it?
I would. This is the third, I know this is your first time here. This is my
I've
third.
heard that before too.
Yeah, this is my third time presenting this because I've seen this issue coming. And this is the last time that we have the opportunity to get ahead of the issue. Yeah, irrespective of what you do, there will be a citizens initiative. The question will be what that policy looks like. Is that a policy that is a skeleton policy, as I outlined to Representative Chenette, or is it a fleshed out policy? And I think that there are two questions here. Do you support legalization, or do you want a concrete policy that's defensible and rational if legalization happens? I'm asking you to craft a rational policy that's more fleshed out than we can do for a citizens initiative, and then send it to the people to answer the question of whether to legalize or not. I do fundamentally believe that the people of Maine should be the ones to answer that question. I think that something that this important should be left up to them. But our job is to craft a rational public policy, and that's what I've done, that's what Representative Dion has done, and the differences between the bills are very, very, very minor in terms of like policy choices. So for me, it's, yes, I've been saying for years that we should do it, and it's been a very difficult uphill battle. We've made progress each time. And I could have just said, you know what, I'm not going to put a bill in this year, vote them all down, I'm just going to take my case to the people. I could have done that. But I believe fundamentally in the process so much that I think that this is the right thing to do, that I'm going to do it, even if I don't necessarily have a lot of faith that it's going to happen.
Representative LaJoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the yellow sheet.
Oh, let me grab mine. No, it's fine.
Under the licensing and regulations,
First page?
you and Representative Dion are different with the rule making. Can you give me an idea or explain as to why there's a difference there between his and yours? Yours is substantial rule, his is technical rule.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So there's two philosophies. One, do you want the legislature to require the approval of those rules, or do you want the agency to? And I'm not super worried either way, but what we've seen in DHHS is that DHHS has been doing, each year they have come out with rules that in some way, shape, or form try to collect information, personally identifiable information from patients. And we have, as a legislature, had to go in every single year and say no, that we do not want to do that. The reason for that is that we don't want patients on a registry in case something happens and the feds decide to raid. We do not want the feds walking into a cancer patient's household and raiding them. So because of the experience in HHS with the medical marijuana program, I put in my bill that the committee of jurisdiction should have oversight over those rules. But I think the folks, I can't speak for Representative Dion, but I do believe that the philosophy on the agency rulemaking is that it'll move faster and they'll be more flexible and have easier response to the market, which may very well be perfectly fine. I've worked with Bablo for years, and I think that they actually they look at this kind of issue in a very different way. They look at it from the regulatory, we're regulating a product and et cetera, than the HHS side. So I'm less concerned about that, but that's where that breakdown came from. It just came from my uncomfortable experience in the HHS program with the medical marijuana.
So yours would be more regulatory, I guess, that they would not be able to go a substantial rule.
It would come back to probably VLA because it's Title 28A. It would come back to VLA for approval of those rules. And then with 1401, it would just be up to the agency to decide. And like I said, it's not a big point of a contention. I wanted you to understand the rationale behind both. But I would be fine with routine technical rules.
I just wanted an explanation so I could understand.
Yeah,
it better.
absolutely.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Just want you to know that it's not a big point of contention with us.
Representative Schmidt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And not to belabor this a little bit, but I really want to zero in on this. You mentioned that your bill and Representative Dion's bill is a rational approach versus a skeleton ballot initiative that we've heard so far. Can you give me an example of what is not necessarily in at least one of the ballot initiatives that have come forward already that is we approved for signatures, something like that, that you feel that is creating a big red flag for you, saying, you know, this is what is in yours and Dion's, or at least yours, that is making it more rational, I guess, a rational approach than just sort of bare bones.
So in Colorado, I talked about this yesterday, they had challenges with edibles in particular, and I make sure that we really flush that out in the regulations in my bill. There are concerns, I think one of the law enforcement folks brought it up, apparently he hadn't read my bill, about butane extraction being as volatile as a meth lab. He is correct about that, which is precisely why I included licensing or requirements in my bill to make sure that any extractions were done through the proper lab and with proper protocols and proper experts. Those are the kinds of details that we're not probably going to sit around and talk about, but that are absolutely essential that are in the bill. And those are details that you'll have to work through at a later date. And, you know, I'm termed out. I might be here next year in the other body, but I might not. So I'm also very concerned about making sure that as we craft the policy, that you have people at your disposal who really know this policy inside out. And I have been through with, Jane can tell you, line by line by line of this bill. And I pointed out in my testimony, there was a lab number missing with third-party laboratories. It's ISO standard lab, but it's an actual number, 1725, 2005 or something like that. That's a very specific standard from ISO, which is a highly credible third-party laboratory. And I want to make sure that that gets into the final policy. It's those details that we were not able to include in a skeleton bill. Those are the types of things that get directed back to you guys to make decisions about 2017. And I'm just trying to save you the time in 2017 from the potential of having to sort through two different initiatives. And the reality is, yes, they could split the vote and neither could pass, but more than likely, mayors are going to vote for both.
Thank you.
Senator Brzezowski.
Always a pleasure.
I had a comment, you are just stick-to-itiveness.
I am persistent.
And
Not
you
yet,
are
it's my
consistent, and you can speak longer than anybody I ever met without taking a breath. I'm just amazed. And stay on topic. I think that's even more important.
And yet, not yet persuasive.
And I remember this bill coming in several times. I think you gave a pretty good speech on it going out for referendum before twice. And that's what you're trying to accomplish now. And I think that's a good approach because it gives us an opportunity to regulate it before it comes back, says cannabis. So leaving up, the same kind of thing that we screwed up on cannabis.
That's happening in the other room right now.
Well, about 5 years late.
Yeah, I know. Believe me.
But that leads up to my question. My question is going to be, because we do have two very similar bills together, if we were to marry those up, have you already thought, do you have an idea how that could happen?
I do.
That you could share with us, maybe not right now, but in some sort of format so that we could kind of see what that would look like?
Yeah, I can sort of walk you through, but we'll get it to you in writing too. So it really comes down to, I mean, I have my reasons why I think prohibition has failed. So it really frustrates me to be talking about some of the market share issues, but really the differences in the bills come down to market share by and large. First and foremost, it's a disagreement between 15 and 16. Even though Representative Dion's bill does not have a referendum in it, the folks, Representative Dion and the folks backing that bill do want it in 15. I think David Boyer would prefer to see it in 16. So that's one policy area that's in a different space. The other policy area is around retail licenses. I think the Dion's bill has 20 retail licenses. Mine allocates it very similarly to liquor, where it's by population of the town. It's roughly half of what the liquor licenses currently are. That maybe, it's probably too many. We've been sort of talking about finding, maybe doing a county population, so it's sort of a hybrid of just a number versus, instead of having it by municipality population growth, have it by county population. We're a little late, we're not quite sure how to suggest this to the committee yet, but we'd like to make sure that there's also some geographic representation, because you don't, for example, in Washington County or Aroostook County, where you have to drive a few hours, you don't want to have too few retail outlets, as we heard the other day, so that people are going to the black market. We want to incentivize people to go to the regulated market. We also don't want one on every street corner. So that's a policy area, and I think we're pretty close to coming up with a proposal that I think the committee can back if they're supportive of the direction we're going. The third area that's of disagreement, and this is a policy decision that I think the committee is really going to need to make, because we're close but we can't quite get there. So the caregiver, there's two sides of the market that are providing currently in the medical marijuana space. The caregivers who are providing for 5 patients plus themselves, up to 5 patients. And then there's the dispensaries. There are 8 dispensaries, but there's 5 companies. One company has 4 of the 8 licenses. And those dispensaries are vertically integrated. They are required to be a nonprofit, which may change in HHS. That's one of the pieces that's being discussed, I think, tomorrow. So they have a cultivation requirement. So they cultivate their own marijuana, or the medical marijuana. They are required to have, they do their own retail outlet. And they do all their production for any edibles that they have. So it's all vertically integrated. I don't think that's a good policy, but that's the policy that we decided because we wanted to maintain control. But those are the 2 markets. And there were about somewhere between, the latest numbers that I've heard are 1,700 or 1,800 caregivers, and there are 8 dispensaries. So the caregivers in the dispensaries, many of them would like to see an opportunity to enter the new market. They've taken the risk when it was really volatile to do so. They've invested a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of expertise in their product, and they'd like an opportunity to enter the new market. Both proposals before you allow them early entrance and priority status. The difference between the 2 proposals is that mine is a clear, equitable way forward. Nobody gets any favoritism. But the dispensaries, and actually the Dion bill builds on the dispensary model in a much more slow growth, and it allows them, I believe, automatic licenses to what they, or that's what they like. I'm not sure if it's in the bill or not. But they would like automatic licenses. So they have a license already in the medical marijuana space. They would like a license in the new space. And David Boyer and I both from MEP would like to keep it equitable so that we're not choosing sides between the 2 industries, but that there's a fair way that they can get recognized for their input, that there's a competitive process for those licenses, whether it be retail or cultivation. And so that's really the big policy area where we're in a disagreement. I understand the rationale, frankly, for the dispensaries wanting to have a license, and they've already gone through a significant application process. They've paid significant fees. They are more tightly regulated. I think their arguments are sound. I just am not in the business of choosing sides between industries, and I don't think that, I just didn't feel that it sent a good message to caregivers who also are doing their part, for the most part, to serve a patient population. So those are the key areas where there are differences. The bills, the tax rates are different. Mine models off of Colorado, and the reason for that is we keep seeing the revenue projections and the revenue allocations from Colorado. And I know that when people are asking me all the time, what is the revenue from Colorado? It didn't seem fair to me to be talking about what Colorado's revenue has been and then to put in a tax structure that was significantly less than that. It's sort of a bait and switch. And I think everybody's sort of in agreement that my tax structure is fine, but we can it'll be up to you guys to determine. But those are the key policy areas Dan, did I miss anything? David?
It actually knows.
I mean, we have been working for years, but really the last 6 months heavily, and certainly in the last couple of weeks in advance of the committee, to try to get to a space where we could identify and crystallize what the differences were.
Senator Rosowski, yes.
Take a good deep breath.
I should have grabbed a water.
If I can impose upon you that, and I'm going to do the same thing with
Yep.
because I don't know where the committee's going to go yet. What I would like to see is something like this that says this is where we both agree, our people agree, this is where we're different, so that in case, I'm not saying it's going to happen.
I understand, believe me.
This committee wants to marry up and come out with one bill at the end that would go out to referendum, that we would be able to do that a lot easier than us all trying to debate what you're doing.
Right, and that's part of why we've been working to try to crystallize what those issues were. I mean, we knew that it would make the committee process significantly easier. So just in terms of process, so Representative Dion's bill is actually built on, I believe, much of the bill that I presented to you last year as an amendment. The other piece to this is that the governor is looking for funding for drug courts and DEA agents and AG officers to focus on the heroin and the opiate trade and the drug traffickers. And so we had talked about last year maybe using a model like this to be able to fund that. And I know that he's brought it back again. And the difference is, the problem is that we were not also able to fund substance abuse treatment, and we were able to do that in here in a meaningful way. But we're very close to that, and we will have that for you. We actually have an analysis of all of the different bills. We just need to put it together in a way that crystallizes what the policy differences are that we currently have.
I want to put priority on that, because we have to have it rolled out.
Yep.
When you say all of the bills, are you talking about the referendum bills also?
Absolutely.
Would you be able to turn over
We would.
that information to us so that we can see the comparison with what's in the referendum?
Absolutely.
Does anybody else have any questions of Representative Wilson? Okay. I would like to have Paul come up. I believe you are one of the initiatives that are out there. I know Diane spoke of one initiative that, I believe the one that will stop collecting signatures if we move forward, but I would like, she gave an assessment of what the initiatives look like and what people are carrying around and what the bills are, and I was wondering if you could just, if there's anything you want to tweak on that or speak on that at all?
Our analyst here, I gave her a copy of our initiative, so
Okay.
she could distribute that to you, or I could run out to my vehicle and grab you a copy for myself. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Susie will make this.
Great. But happy to answer any questions about differences. Again, we developed our initiative with as much detail in mind, and we have 90% of the rules being major substantive, because it's our firm belief that when this policy goes forward, that the legislature should have as much control as possible, and to make sure that citizens will have a voice in what the rules which will be enforced as laws are. Does that answer your question?
So when you say, so if your initiative were to be the one that passed and became law, would it then go into effect immediately, or would it be something where you're saying it's major substance? So would it be something that we then would review, or the department, I should say, would review and make rules and then become legal, or how would that work?
My understanding is that the department would most likely make do emergency rulemaking to implement the initial set of rules, and then when the legislature reconvened after those rules were produced, then we would have a chance for the committee of jurisdiction to review the emergency rules and develop the major substantive rules. So when we're looking at implementation, I think we're looking at passes November 2016, I believe we're looking at January 2018 when retail stores would be going online per se.
That's your initiative to move forward. So when people say it becomes law and it becomes legal, if your initiative were to win, it wouldn't be legal in the state until probably 18.
From my understanding,
From your thought of what the process would be.
I think that people will be able to start cultivating their own, and they'd be able to possess up to 2.5 ounces without facing civil penalty. But when it comes down to the rulemaking for how any of the licensed entities are going to be dealt with, I think that would happen in 2018. If we look at what happened in Washington and Colorado, they took about over a year, a little over a year before they said that retail stores could come online and start selling to the general public.
Does anybody have any questions? Let's see. So we will get a copy of what your initiative looks like, or is it just a summary?
Well, I have a summary. I can get you a copy of the full text also. You'll want that.
I can,
I'll get it for you.
So when people are going around and collecting signatures, do they have just the summary or do they carry the full text?
they carry the full petition. If the committee would like, I could run down to my vehicle and come back with the actual 12-page double-sided initiative. It does contain all of the language with that we submitted to the Secretary of State. It just has the summary on the front and then the fiscal impact on the front also.
And that is what they are carrying when they collect signatures. Thank you.
Correct.
Representative LaJoy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Paul, let's say we vote on this, the initiative goes through and so on. How will that affect the medical aspect of it? And the reason I'm asking that is individuals are allowed to grow a certain amount and use it. Would the necessary have to go to a medical marijuana to get it their own? Do you understand where I'm coming from?
I think there's a couple points that, if I'm understanding you correctly, is the first point is that would someone have to go to a doctor to get a certification to be able to legally possess and cultivate their own marijuana or purchase it through a provider? And then would those people who are currently medical patients stop going to a medical marijuana provider and start with a retail provider? Again, I think it's a lot of individual choice. The way that's happening in Colorado right now is that there's a big difference between recreational marijuana and medical marijuana. Medical marijuana tends to be more specific, really like tailored strains, like a specific type of marijuana for the patient's need. While on the recreational marijuana over there is tending to be just commercially mass-produced, so it doesn't necessarily have the same quality or medicinal effects. I think that there would still be a significant amount of patients who would continue to become medical marijuana patients, and they would continue to be getting certified from their doctors or their nurse practitioners. But they would be the ones who would say, I'm going to my nurse practitioner or doctor because I want them to be continually involved in how I'm using marijuana to make sure that it's helping my medical issue.
Okay, just a question. I thought I'd ask someone, just a clear my head. So it would potentially have an effect, possibly.
It will. I mean, I think 100%.
But not 100%, we'll say. We'll say whatever percentage it is, it would have an effect on it.
But I've only seen the two bills and the one draft from Paul. All three of them specifically state that the medical use of marijuana whole program and system exists on its, still it continues to exist. And so you can't predict people's behavior, but the law wouldn't push people in one direction or the other.
And I guess, to follow up on that, if I may, the difference between Colorado and Washington right now is Washington recently approved a measure that is going to be, in some ways, getting rid of their medical marijuana program and wrapping it into the recreational marijuana program. And so if you are a registered patient in the state of Washington, you only pay the medical marijuana sales tax. You don't pay the excise and sales tax on recreational marijuana. I know that's a very big concern for many of the medical marijuana patients and caregivers in this state, that if we go forward with a recreational use marijuana policy, that it will have, that the legislature or the regulating agencies will try to roll the medical program into the recreational program, either for ease of regulatory issues or for tax purposes. That was from people I've spoken to up in Washington. One of the reasons the Washington legislature decided to roll their medical program into the recreational program is because more people were becoming medical